After setting up all relationships between all models, let's head on to the Columns tab, and this is where we define all the actual fields that each model will have in the database. The first thing you'll notice here is that we didn't start with an empty list. Jeerokode has already automatically created the user ID primary key column for us based on the configuration we set when we created the user model. And if we had already defined our relationships, the foreign key columns would also be pre-generated here automatically. That's a huge time saver. Now look at the column list, it's not just tracking the column name. Each column has some really important properties attached to it. First there's file, array. File means this column can store a file reference, and array means this column can hold multiple values rather than just a single value. Then there's formed database, and this is a really thoughtful feature. Database means this column exists in the database table, while form means this column will appear in the front-end forms. You can set these independently, so for example a password hash column would be database only, while a password confirmation field would be form only since you don't actually store it. This gives you very fine-grained control over what goes where. And finally we have indexing and constraints, with 4 options, null meaning the field can be empty, unique meaning no two records can have the same value, indexed meaning the database will create an index on this column for faster queries, and filter meaning this column can be used to filter data in your API. You can see that user ID already has database toggled on, and unique and indexed are highlighted, which makes perfect sense for a primary key. Now let's click Create New Column and start adding all the fields for our user model, things like username, email, password hash, date of birth, and is active, all straight from our SQL schema. So when we click Create New Column, this is the full column creation form, and this is where you define exactly how each field behaves, both on the front end and in the database. Let me walk you through each section carefully. At the top we have the name field, which is simply the column name. Then we have isFile and isArray checkboxes. IsFile means this column handles file uploads, and isArray means this column can hold multiple values. You also have accepted file types to restrict what kind of files are allowed, and array size to define how many items the array can hold. Then we have column accessibility, and this is a really important setting that controls how this column behaves across your entire application. It has 2 options. The first is accessible to user and form. When you select this, the column is treated as a regular user-facing field. It gets automatically included in your request DTOs and forms across all routes. Think of fields like username, email, or first name, fields that users interact with directly all the time. The second option is system backend or specific routes. This is for fields that are more sensitive or controlled. These fields won't appear in regular forms everywhere. Instead they only show up in specific routes where you explicitly want them, and access to those routes is controlled by user roles. A good example would be something like isActive or a user's role assignment. You don't want regular users to be able to update those fields freely, only admins through specific protected routes. Now here's something important to keep in mind. Even if a column is not going to be stored in the database, it's still good practice to assign it a database column type. This is because these types are used in your DTOs and request models throughout the application. Similarly, even if a field only appears in specific routes, you should still set an input type for it, because when it does appear in a form, Jeerokode needs to know how to render it correctly. Now the form is split into 3 panels. The first panel is Form and Inputs, the front-end side. Check in Form if this field should appear in your application forms. Then select the input type, text, email, password, number, date, drop-down, and so on. Set the label, which is what the user sees, and the placeholder as the hint text inside the input. The second panel is Database Structure, the back-end side. Check in Database if this column should be stored in the database. Select the database column type, varchar, int, boolean, date, decimal, and so on. Set the size, a default value if needed, and you can link it to one of our app enums. So for example, our order status column would be linked to our order status enum we created earlier. The third panel is Indexing and Constraints, where you set allow null if the field is optional, unique if no 2 records can share the same value, indexed for faster database queries, and allow filter if you want this column to be filterable through the API. And just like with models, Jeerokode has already parsed our SQL schema and generated column suggestions at the bottom. For the user model you can see username, email, password hash, date of birth, and is active are all pre-suggested with form and database already toggled on and the appropriate constraints highlighted. All we need to do is click accept on each one, fill in the input type and database column type, set the column accessibility, adjust any constraints if needed, and hit submit. Let's go ahead and start configuring these columns for each model. I will see you in another video after setting columns in all models.